Hi, Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today we answer the question and wrestle with the question, should you merge your practice? And I'm bringing one of my colleagues, one of my dear friends, Daniel Struna, here to have a conversation with us about his experience in merging and advising people on mergers. And the next episode that we're going to do, that you're going to listen to Daniel talk about, that he and I will set up in a few minutes, is a fantastic, successful merger. But Daniel and I created a workbook called Should We Merge? And I thought it makes sense for Daniel and I to come on the episode and talk a little bit about this, because this is a common thing that we hear at Atticus, a common thing that a lot of our practice advisors deal with, a common thing that we get involved with, and a common thing that we untangle and help people leave practices where they merged, and it was probably an ill-advised merger. So with that, I'd like to, Daniel, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. I always love being here. Thank you. It's always a treat and a privilege.
Well, I appreciate it. And you're doing such a great job. And this upcoming episode where you advise some very fabulous lawyers, which we'll talk about in a second, allowed you and I to spend some time and deconstruct or construct the 10 big mistakes that we see lawyers make when they merge. And the top 3 are ones I want to spend a few minutes with you to talk about today, because you and I both came at this from different perspectives. These are mistakes I've personally made. Number 1 is a mistake that I've made not once, not twice, but 3 times in my own personal practice. It's one that pains me to talk about. But these are, I think, from our perspective, do not pass go until you've answered these 10 critical questions about should we merge. And I think these are probably the most important questions. You and I have talked about this and we debated this. The next episode, which is a fabulous episode, is a successful merger. And so what I want to do is have you talk about that for a minute and just kind of set up that upcoming episode. And then you and I'll talk about let's focus on the top 3 mistakes that we see. And then those that would like to download our workbook and hit the show notes and download the workbook and talk to you further if they want to, or talk to us, further about it. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's fantastic. Excited.
Okay, well, talk to me about this upcoming episode and why you think it's important. Just kind of do a 2 to 3 minute intro for people so they understand the context for our workbook.
Sure. So the next episode is going to feature the players, right? So it's 2 firms that successfully came together and have completed a successful, by all measures, very successful merger of those 2 firms. And so that conversation is going to walk through sort of from A to Z, how did that process unfold? How did they approach the conversation initially to even be talking about a potential, merger of the 2 firms? All the issues and challenges and opportunities that came from thinking about, merging the 2 firms. And it's just going to be sort of a live unpacking of, just walking through step by step, what did it look like? How did they do it? What were the sort of step-by-step process of it? So I think it's it's almost like just a case study, for a merger, but a successful one. So great case study to kind of analyze. And it's just amazing people that were involved. So it's going to be a great sort of thing for everyone to listen to. And I would say it's today's conversation and, the next episode with the 2 law firm partners, or 1 law firm partners now, is incredibly valuable, of course, if you are now thinking about, or if you perceive that in the future someday you may think about, merging your firm with another firm. But I'll say there's all kinds of, sort of nuggets and great thinking and ideas that will come out of these conversations that apply to many practices in many different ways, even outside of the merger conversation. But that's just my take. So just to introduce the players that I mentioned a minute ago. So it's a great series of family law attorneys in the Jacksonville area. So it's Molly Sasso, Christy Guerrero, and Jay Henderlight. And the firm as it stands today, post-merger, is Sasso, Guerrero, and Hinderlight, amazing family law firm. And I'm not going to go too much into the detail just because we're going to dive into that on our next episode. But those are the players that were involved, and it's a pretty fascinating story. So I'm looking forward to having everyone hear it next time around.
And so there's a lot to learn in that episode because they've grown the firm tremendously.
Yeah.
But I think the foundation of the growth was really the work that you did with them and they did as partners to work through a couple of different issues. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is talk through the three big mistakes or three common mistakes that lawyers make when they look at merging their practices or when they merge their practices. And let me just for a moment distinguish merger, okay? Merger is distinct from living together or rooming together. So the example would be you and I decide we're going to rent office space together, and we put on the door Daniel and Steve law offices.
Or Steve and Daniel.
Or Steve and Daniel. I think of Steve and Daniel. Daniel, Steve. I don't know. Daniel and Steve sounds good, but the the purpose, though, is that we're renting space. You keep separate finances. I keep separate finances. We maybe share receptionists. We keep separate staff. We keep a separate case management system, and we keep separate clients. So I like to call these types of arrangements roommates or suite mates. Now, we may market under one name, or we may have a name where we're holding ourselves out as a law firm, but the truth is we're not. We're just basically marketing under a name. And this is a common practice with a lot of lawyers. Yeah. So I want to distinguish that this is not a merger. That's basically, living together is not a marriage. It's not a shared thing. So a merger means typically shared money, shared team, shared technology. And so you're basically going to ultimately have shared clients. So basically, as a firm, you are sharing and truly, in the pure sense of the word, legally merged in partners together.
Yep.
So it's important to understand that the comp systems might be different, but they're truly a distinct legal entity together. So sometimes lawyers get confused on this and like, well, we're not actually merged. We tell people we're merged, but we're not. So this is about a conversation about the three mistakes we see lawyers make when they merge and have shared identity, money, clients, staff, and tech. Does it work for you?
I think that's perfect. Yeah. And I really appreciate you sort of diving into and defining what a merger is and isn't, because I see that all the time too, sort of one or more, two or more attorneys living under the same roof. Actually, I've seen a lot more than that, 20, 25 attorneys living under the same roof, but they're not merged or one firm in any real sense of the word. So I appreciate that, definition for the conversation.
In those types of firms, they hunt as a pack, but eat alone. That's how I like
right.
to describe it. They hunt as a pack, but they eat alone. And those firms fall apart. And lawyers move around, and they move around.
They're revolving doors. Yeah, there's just people coming in and out. Yeah,
it's a revolving door because they lack a common vision, a common direction. So let's talk about mistake number one. And you and I talked about this, and if you're okay, I'm going to say it because this amuses me to no end. And it's a mistake I made like no less than 3 times. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The first one is, I'm cute, you're cute, we should merge. And you're laughing at it. What it really means is you're a good lawyer, I'm a good lawyer. I respect your legal skills, you respect my legal skills. We should merge. And this is a common mistake that a lot of lawyers make. You and I see this all the time because the lawyers respect each other from a legal skill perspective. However, their businesses are totally, utterly incompatible. Their businesses are incompatible because they haven't really taken a step back and looked at the business side of the merger. Like, okay, who are we? What do we do? Who do we serve? Right? They just look at, you're a good lawyer, I'm a good lawyer, we should merge. And I think this is probably the biggest mistake. And I made this mistake not once, not twice, but 3 times in my practice where I respected the other lawyer's legal skills. We merged our practices together. And each one of those were a total disaster. And they were a disaster because I lost my friend, not because it was a bad business move. So each one of those, the friendship ended because I became so frustrated.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably the biggest mistake. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think part of it is because it's like easy. It's easier to just stay on the surface and say, nope, I don't, kind of close my eyes. I don't need any additional information. I don't need to dig any deeper. I know, so and so is a great lawyer. I know that we, have some sort of good connection on a friendship level or relationship level. And if I just stop there, I don't have to worry about anything else, right? It's sort of like it's sort of a version of putting our head in the sand as we move forward with something really important and very strategic to the future of our firm, which obviously that's why it's mistake number one, right? Because it's just not a great idea to do that. So it's like very surface level, not going into the details of all the reasons why you should or shouldn't move forward. But it is easier, right? It's easier on the front end, but maybe like to your own personal experience, it's not easier on the backside if it doesn't work out, right?
No, it's usually terrible on the backside, and it's a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of complexity, and sometimes very, very expensive.
True.
And,
Yeah.
just not a good play. So
And
go ahead.
no, just the other thing I'll say is I'm an attorney, you're an attorney, we work with attorneys. Those are all of our members are attorneys. And we're all trained to dive into the details on everything that we do from a legal substantive perspective. Our whole training is get all the details, dive down, get every single thing that you need, all these different sort of aspects of lawyer training that when it comes to a potential merger, we suddenly just throw it out the window and say, no, we're good. He or she's a good lawyer. I'm a good lawyer, and that's enough. I don't need to know anything else. It's just, ironic in a way, right? Very interesting.
Well, I think it's the problem that you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
when I did these mergers, I did the mergers because I trusted the lawyer and I trusted their legal skills.
Yeah.
And I think the second issue, which I'm going to ask you to talk about in a second, is what I learned in hindsight, which is probably the second big mistake, would have probably given me better perspective on whether or not we should emerge, because you have a completely different skill set as a lawyer, contrast it to being a business owner. And I think that's when I merged, I had a radically different vision of what I wanted for my business and what I wanted for my life than what my partners did. So that leads me to number two. So why don't you talk about number two? Hey, Steve, I just want to interrupt the show to talk to you for a moment. Growing a firm requires management structure. And a lot of us have the tendency as lawyers to dump a lot of things on our most trusted people and expect them to figure it out. This is the reason we created the Team Leader Certification Program. It's a 6-month, 12-session program that's designed by us to specifically help a team member learn how to be a team leader. Now, you may be thinking as a lawyer, well, I can teach them. No, you can't. You've never been a team leader. Now, the next group starts in April. We have limited spots. And if you're a member of our audience, you can save $500 when you register. All you have to do is grab the code from the show notes below. And if you're ready to start that growth, get that team leader, register them now, and help them go to the next level of their career and help you go to the next level of your firm. So that leads me to number two. So why don't you talk about number two?
Yeah. So, I think you got at it with the word vision, right? So, number two is really the mistake is not making sure that one, you have a clear vision on what you want the practice to look like at some point in the future, or what the vision for the practice is. And two, you don't have a vision for your own, personal life, right? The ethos of Atticus, right, is great practice, great life. And so if you don't have a dual vision for the practice, but also your life, it's almost impossible to know if you're aligned in that vision with this other potential partner in terms of merging, because you don't have a vision. So how do you even know if you're in alignment? And if they don't have a vision for practice or life, same thing. If nobody has a vision for the future with the practice or for their life, how can you possibly be in alignment on what that vision is? And so that's one, I mean, that's it, right? I mean, sort of at the base level. Or if maybe you do have a vision, right, for for your practice or what you foresee the practice to be, and maybe they do too, but maybe you never talk about it, right? And so you don't have alignment. You each have visions, but you don't have alignment on what it is because you haven't really discussed it and you just stayed at that surface level. And if those two visions don't really, like those sort of roadmaps don't align, right? At some point, it's like you're taking this trip, this journey, but one of you is going to really hate the drive because you're going to the wrong, you're driving to the wrong place, right? So it's not going to work out so great.
Well, this is the big distinction between idea, vision, and plan. And so some lawyers may have an idea. Well, I have an idea where I want to go. That's worthless. Like everybody has an idea. Like I could care less. Well, I have an idea. I don't care. Like anybody says I have an idea, I usually say, okay, you're not serious yet. And then I have a vision. Okay, what's a vision? Here's what I think. Like, okay, great, good. Show me your plan.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons we've designed the Path Workshop, the My Great Life Focus. One of the reasons we make lawyers put pen to paper, literally, because I want them to articulate the vision by sharing the plan. So if I'm coaching somebody who's saying, hey, look, we should merge, I'm going to recommend that they sit down and do a My Great Life, 10-year, My Great Decade together, and maybe do the My Great, do the Path Workshop together, where they sit down and say, okay, here's what the next 10 years look like for me, and here's what I want to do. Because there's some lawyers that are in a position where they're like, okay, I'm going to do this for 5 more years and then retire. I'm going to do this for 10 more years and retire. Yeah. And my goal here is to max out my income and not invest a lot into marketing. And then somebody else might be saying, okay, I'm going to build this. I got a 25-year game plan. And what I'm going to do is spend a lot of money to build the foundation, build up my firm. We're going to spend a lot of money for advertising and marketing. We're on this killer website. It's going to be amazing. Then we're going to have 1,000 referral sources. Already this is not going to work, because one's going to want to invest money into the future. One's going to want to invest money, not invest money, but part of their retirement plan. I went to a firm as a advisor, and a bunch of the young Turks, lawyers between the ages of 40 and 50, brought me in to talk to some of the senior partners. And the senior partners were in their ages between 60 to as much as like mid 70s, like 70, 80. And they wanted me to talk. They brought me in to kind of like do a strategic plan and things like that. It took about, I discovered 3 problems very quickly. Number one, the senior partners had unfunded pension plans, which is a huge liability. 2, the senior partners were trying to maximize income, and they didn't want to take any of the firm profits and put it on marketing. And 3, they all thought the interwebs were a fad and that stuff would go away. And this is the first day, this is the first day of the retreat. And, I think at lunchtime, I was like 9, noon at lunch. We all went to lunch together. And I pulled a couple of the young lawyers that brought me in to talk to the senior lawyers. And I said, you guys are just going to leave. You just don't know when yet. You haven't figured out, but you're going to leave. It just becomes a question of when, because there's no way you're going to come to terms with the senior partners. They're just not going to do this. You're not going to buy these guys out. They want you to buy them out, but this makes no sense. You guys I'm going to give you maybe 1 year to 2 years, at the outside 3 years, but it's going to take you a while to realize you need to leave. Totally incompatible future, totally incompatible business goals, totally incompatible great life. Inside the same firm, prestigious firm, well-known firm. But within minutes of me being there, I'm like, oh, no. This is just not going to work. It's not going to work. No. So sometimes firms fall apart because even though they are good lawyers, even though they practice well together, they've lost sight of what that vision and plan for the future is. So I agree with you 100%.
No. And as tough as that is to hear, or sort of as, brutal as it is to face that reality from the story that you just told, better to face it, now, today, as opposed to a year from now or 3 years from now or 5 years from now, when it'll just be, even the situation will just get, basically compounding interest worse, right?
Yeah, well, that's the old joke. There's only two types of suffering in life: short term and long. You choose.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
and I was like, you guys have no idea. But it's also like being a lawyer. You tell the client, nope, this is not going to work. Here's my advice. Here's what I think you should do. What you should do, and the client doesn't follow it. So sometimes that happens. The firm ultimately did split up, and the young lawyers, the young Turks, went across town and opened up a very vibrant practice and learned from their lessons. And the other lawyers just basically continued to work in that space until they all either died off or quit. It was really weird.
Steve, could I circle back to one thing you said
Sure.
earlier? It's just that, and this applies to, mergers, but I think anytime somebody comes to me and says, hey, can you help me assess this decision, or this like very big, thing. It could be a merger. It could be, should I open the second office, whatever it is. But in today's conversation, the context is mergers. My first question to them is going to be, well, let's look at your migrate life. Let's look at your migrate decade. Like, how does this fit in? And if you haven't done that, or if you haven't looked at it in 6 months, if you've never done one in your whole life, you haven't been at the path workshop, you haven't done the work of figuring out, the thinking behind what is your vision for your future. If you don't know that, how can you possibly answer these other bigger questions, specific things about strategic decisions that you're making in your practice, in your life? So it always goes back to, what is your vision? So I just wanted to sort of cement something that you already said that, but just, it's incredibly important in the context of, should I enter into this merger? But it's also important, should I, insert into the blank there in terms of big decisions.
Not to hammer it home, but I agree with you. And you and I have not talked about this at all. No. But when I start working with a lawyer, and sometimes, get very successful high income earners that earn 7 figures, 10 figures in income, and they're doing financially very, very well, and they need advice. And the first thing I do is say, okay, well, let's do the migrate decade together.
Yeah.
And let's do the migrate decade together. And they usually resist it because they never have the time. Like, I don't have the time for this. Oh, good. So we're just going to drive around town with no map. Is that basically our plan? Like, hey, where do you want to go? I don't know, but I want to go somewhere fast. Okay.
It's like, goes back to that sort of easier just to stay on the surface. I mean, easier in the short term, but doesn't really get you what you want, or long term.
So I'm with you. It's a difficult thing.
Yeah,
it's a very difficult thing. Well, let's do number 3. So what's number 3 in your perspective? Like, if you saw the third biggest mistakes that lawyers make, and they can all download the workbook. We've got 10 different things in the workbook, and the workbook's got exercises and all kinds of cool stuff in it. But what's number 3 for you?
So I'm going to quote, I think I'll do a movie quote, if that's okay. Show me the money. So it's the money, right? It's the financial. I didn't do that quote very good, but it's Jerry Maguire, right? But the third biggest mistake is not addressing sort of the elephant in the room, which is, any merger is on some very important level a financial, decision, and there's a lot of financial pieces that go into it, right? So if you're just going to be roommates, like you were talking about at the opening, the money doesn't need to be a big part of the conversation. You're just, okay, what's the split on the front desk, or what's the split on the rent? We'll just split everything, down the middle, or in threes, or whatever it is. But when you're doing, coming together and truly merging together as firms, you have a lot more complexity around what are we going to do with this big thing called, the dollar sign. And so not understanding what that's going to look like, not talking about what's going to be workable for everybody involved is a big mistake. And I am almost sort of shocked sometimes when I see how, and this is usually before my involvement in the process, but how far attorneys will go in a conversation about merging without talking about money. it's like actually kind of shocking. I don't know if you've had that experience. Like they just don't bring it up until very late in the game, and then it can just, throw everything off basically, right?
Well, it's an important conversation because if you're in the trap of I'm cute, you're cute, we're both good lawyers talking about
Yeah.
money, it's
Yeah.
dirty. It's dirty,
Right.
and it's a dirty topic. It's a dirty topic. We shouldn't talk about these dirty
Yeah.
words. And it's probably the most important conversation if you're going to do it from a business perspective. So the sign that the lawyers aren't talking about money usually shows me immediately they don't understand what they're doing, because everything from origination to profit splits
Right. Yeah.
are we going to do draw? Are we going to do base salaries? What are we going to do? How's this going to work? Are we going to do capital contributions? What's our line of credit?
Yep.
What's our financial mix? What do our clients look like? Really understanding the nitty gritty elements of the practice is critical. Even in hourly rate shops, I see lawyers in hourly rate shops, and it's one of the things I like. Working with lawyers that charge by the hour, because they're probably one of the easiest things to quickly clean up financially.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
you have some lawyers that won't take retainers. Oh, now we just do handshakes and I send my clients bills. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. No. We get a retainer. Well, how much retainer? Oh, $500. $500. How much? What's the value? What's your budget going to be on the case? Is it a $50,000 case over 2 years? You're going to get $500? Like, are you kidding me? No, we need maybe 10 to 20% up front. Oh, no one will write that. Well, then we probably shouldn't be taking the case. Oh, but they're my friend. Whoa. Right. Already you've got some problems
Yeah.
with this, right? You already know all the issues are starting to show up. So the business side of looking at it comes through discussion of money, comp programs. Are we going to do like a roll weighted model? Are we going to do profit splitting? Are we going to track originations? Are your clients my clients? Are your clients your clients? So, how's this going to work through? And then walking through, once again, a business plan, a written business plan, not thoughts, not ideas, not possibilities, but a written business plan saying year one, we're looking for this, year two, we're looking for this, year three, we're looking for this, getting clear on how much money you're going to budget for marketing, how much money you're going to put into team. Are you going to put money into team training? We've seen firms break up over the fact that one partner wanted to spend money, invest money with Atticus, and the other partner is like, well, you just do what I say. You don't need them. Just do what I say, because I'm
Sure.
naturally a brilliant lawyer.
Yeah.
Just do what I say. So I think it's probably the third biggest problem that we see lawyers, because they don't want to talk about it. And that's why I think working with you as a practice advisor or any advisors are important, because we can go, let's look at the money side of this. Because if the money isn't going to work, the merger isn't going
to work. Not for very long. Yeah. And it's almost guaranteed that there's still, even if you do address the money and the financials and all the connections that a firm has to money, all the things that you listed, right? Even if you do address all those things, which you should and can do, it's still going to cause some issues. But at least you've, on the front end, you've talked about it, you've talked through it, you've talked through the different scenarios, you have an alignment on what to do if something does come up. So you've kind of worked through the hypotheticals, so that when issues do arise or something does come up, it's not happening. You're not talking about it for the first time. And you maybe have sort of a rule book potentially for, dealing with it.
They're uncomfortable but critical conversations. And that's the reason so many law firms mergers fail miserably, because we don't talk about the uncomfortable elements. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know as lawyers about the deal side. And I think that's how come on this upcoming episode, you were so critically important to the process, because you were able to guide them through it. Daniel, as we start to wrap up, any last thoughts?
I think my final thought for today's conversation would be, these are the three biggest mistakes that we've identified. The workbook obviously has the full 10, and so people should take a look at that. But I think one of my big takeaways from talking more about it, with the the attorneys that will be on the next episode and talking about it with you, is that one of the most important thing you can do is keep asking questions, right? So it's when you stop at, it's like you're looking at potentially merging with somebody or somebody's, and you're not asking a lot of questions. That's a huge red flag, right? So to yourself. So if you find yourself not asking questions or not knowing what the questions are to ask, and obviously the workbook is going to help a ton with that and the conversation next week, but just keep asking questions. If you do nothing else, keep asking questions, because that is going to save you a lot of, as you said, long-term pain and suffering.
It's a tricky thing that you said, because sometimes you're not sure of the right question. And that's the reason we did the workbook. We did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I did the
That's sorry, Steve. And that's the reason for the next episode, which is listen to people that went through this process over the course of a period of time. And, they asked each other a lot of questions to get through and make it a successful process. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because the questions and the process they went through with you created the foundation for I would say, a very dominant firm in their space in the Jacksonville area. They've grown rapidly. Their reputation has grown rapidly. But the partners in this upcoming episode got very clear on their lanes, their roles, what they did, what their contributions were. So great job on your part. Like, you did a fantastic job. You represented Atticus well. You represented them well. I got to be careful using the term represented in the context of this, but you advised them well, and you advised them carefully. And they're wonderful lawyers. Like, these are not, these are fantastic.
They're amazing. All board certified. They're fantastic attorneys. Just great people too.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
But I do my part, and they do all the hard work. That's what I always say. So they implement on it, right, Steve? They do all the work.
You can only bring so much to the party if somebody doesn't.
That's right.
Somebody doesn't actually execute on it. All right, Daniel. So a great job. Hopefully this episode is useful to you, the listener. If you know someone who's thinking about merging, or you've ever thought about merging, this is a great episode, because it kind of goes through the top 3 mistakes. The workbook goes through kind of the 10 critical conversations, the 10 core questions I think that you must consider before you merge. This doesn't address how to merge. This is really just a precursor to merging. Right. So how to merge in itself is a whole other conversation. So I don't want to be clear with everybody that's listening to this. We're just addressing, should we merge? Mm-hmm. And what are the 10 core questions that we, as advisors, you and I would encourage people to consider and look at and explore? Then how to merge is a whole other conversation, which is somewhat discussed in the upcoming episode. With that, Daniel, thank you. Thanks for all the great work that you do here at Atticus. Thanks for all the great work that you do with your clients, and great job, bud. Well done.
Thank you, Steve. Always great to be here. Love talking to you and to our members.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.